The morning sun cast golden light across the crystal gardens of House Stellaris as Lady Vera walked through the floating pathways. Her silk robes, woven with threads that sparkled like captured starlight, rustled softly in the artificial breeze. Around her, the most exotic plants from across the galaxy grew in perfect harmony: blue flame flowers from the volcanic world of Pyros, singing vines from the forest moon of Melodia, and crystalline trees that chimed gentle melodies when the wind touched their branches. At the center of this magnificent garden knelt a human man named Ben. His simple brown clothing stood out against the vibrant colors surrounding him. He worked carefully with a small tool, tending to a cluster of rainbow moss that had been struggling to adapt to the orbital habitat's environment. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if he had all the time in the universe. "Good morning, my lady," Ben said without looking up from his work. His voice was soft and calm, like water flowing over smooth stones. Vera paused beside him, watching as he gently adjusted the growing medium around the delicate plant. "How is the moss doing today?" "Better," Ben replied, finally glancing up at her with a small smile. It needed time to understand its new home. Plants are not so different from people in that way. 3 months had passed since their wedding, and Vera still felt amazement at her choice. When she announced her intention to marry the human gardener, the reaction from her family and friends had been swift and harsh. Her father, Admiral Corinth Stellaris, had raged for hours about the family honor. Her mother had locked herself in her chambers for a week. The other noble houses of the Galactic Confederation had whispered and pointed whenever Vera appeared at social gatherings. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Compared to ancient races like the Ethrians, who had built star empires when Earth was still cooling, humans seemed primitive and unremarkable. They lacked the massive physical strength of the warrior Crothan, the psychic abilities of the silver-skinned Zephyrians, or the technological mastery of the insectoid Vex Collective. Yet something about Ben had captured Vera's attention from the moment she first saw him in the gardens. Perhaps it was his complete focus when working with plants, or the way he seemed to understand exactly what each growing thing needed. Maybe it was his quiet wisdom, or how he listened to her thoughts about galactic politics without judgment or advice she had not asked for. "Lady Vera," called a voice from the garden entrance. A young Ethrian servant approached with quick, nervous steps. His blue-tinted skin showed the pale coloring that marked him as anxious. "Admiral Corinth requests your presence in the war room immediately." Vera sighed and looked down at Ben, who had returned his attention to the rainbow moss. "Will you join us for the family meeting?" Ben shook his head gently. "Your father prefers when I stay in the gardens. Besides, the Melodian vines need their afternoon feeding." As Vera walked toward the main habitat structure, she felt a familiar weight in her chest. 3 months of marriage, and Ben still made no effort to integrate himself into her family's affairs or social circle. When Admiral Corinth hosted military commanders from across the sector, Ben would excuse himself to tend the greenhouse. During important political dinners, he could be found in the herb garden, categorizing seed varieties. Even when Vera tried to include him in conversations about galactic current events, he would nod politely but contribute little. The war room of House Stellaris occupied the central hub of their orbital habitat. Massive holographic displays showed star charts, trade routes, and military positions throughout this sector of the galaxy. Admiral Corinth stood before the largest display, his tall frame imposing even in civilian clothes. His silver hair and weathered face spoke of decades commanding fleets in the service of the Confederation. Around the circular table sat the other members of the family council. Vera's older brother David, a captain in the Confederation Navy, wore his dress uniform with perfect precision. Her younger sister Maya, trained in diplomatic arts, had her data tablet ready to record important decisions. Uncle Rico, who managed the family's vast mining operations, drummed his fingers impatiently on the table surface. "Vera," Admiral Corinth said without turning from the display, "we have a situation that requires immediate family discussion." The holographic star chart zoomed in to show the Outer Rim territories, where several of House Stellaris' mining operations extracted rare minerals from asteroid fields. Red warning indicators flashed around 3 different locations. The Void Reapers have struck again, David reported, his voice tight with anger. 6 more mining stations attacked in the past week. They hit fast and hard, taking everything valuable and leaving no survivors. Maya activated her tablet and shared detailed reports with the room's display system. Intelligence suggests they have at least 20 ships in their main fleet, with smaller raiding groups spreading across multiple sectors. Their leader calls himself Gorthak the Destroyer. Uncle Rico slammed his fist on the table. 50 years I've been building those operations. Each station represents millions of credits and investment, not to mention the workers' lives lost. Admiral Corinth finally turned to face the family council. The Confederation Navy is spread thin fighting the Nexus War in the core systems. Local sector defense forces lack the firepower to engage a fleet this size effectively. We must decide how House Stellaris responds to this threat. We have 3 options, Maya continued, highlighting different sections of her report. First, we abandon the Outer Rim operations and consolidate our assets in safer territory. Second, we hire mercenary protection from one of the warrior guilds. Third, we organize a coalition of affected mining families and pool our resources for a military response. The first option is cowardice, David said immediately. House Stellaris has never retreated from pirates and bandits. The second option is expensive, Uncle Rico added. Crothan mercenaries cost more than our quarterly profits, and they have no guarantee of success against an enemy this organized. Admiral Corinth nodded slowly. Which leaves us with the third option. I have already reached out to houses Drakmor, Vesperian, and New Terra. They have all suffered similar losses and expressed interest in a joint operation. As her family debated military tactics and resource allocation, Vera found her thoughts drifting to Ben. She had tried to invite him to these meetings several times, hoping he might offer a different perspective on their challenges. But Ben always declined politely, saying he preferred to leave such matters to those with proper experience and training. The discussion continued for over 2 hours. Maps were analyzed, fleet compositions debated, and timeline considerations argued back and forth. Finally, Admiral Corinth called for a vote on organizing the coalition response. All in favor, he asked. David, Maya, and Uncle Rico raised their hands immediately. After a moment's hesitation, Vera added her own vote. Excellent. I will contact the other houses and begin planning our joint operation. David, you will liaise with their military commanders. Maya, handle the political negotiations to ensure everyone contributes fairly. Rico, calculate what resources we can commit without disrupting essential operations. As the meeting broke up, Admiral Corinth approached Vera privately. His expression showed the same disapproval she had seen since her wedding day. I notice your husband chose not to attend another important family discussion, he said quietly. Ben prefers to focus on his botanical research, Vera replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. Vera, you are my daughter and I love you, but this marriage concerns me greatly. House Stellaris faces real threats that require unity and strength. We need family members who understand responsibility and commitment to our legacy. Ben is committed to his work and to me. Admiral Corinth shook his head slowly. Tending gardens is a fine hobby, but we are facing armed pirates who have already killed hundreds of our people. Your husband shows no interest in protecting this family's interests or even understanding the challenges we face. What happens when this conflict escalates? What happens when we need every capable person to stand with us? Vera had no good answer for her father's questions. She loved Ben deeply, but his complete disengagement from family affairs had begun to worry her as well. Every other spouse who married into House Stellaris had taken active roles in business, military, or political operations. They contributed their skills and knowledge to strengthen the family's position in galactic society. Ben seemed content to remain in his gardens, speaking softly to plants and avoiding any involvement in the larger world around them. That evening, Vera found Ben in the greenhouse section of the habitat, working under artificial starlight with a collection of rare flowering specimens. He had changed from his daytime work clothes into a simple gray robe that made him appear even quieter and more withdrawn. "How did the family meeting go?" he asked without looking up from a delicate blue orchid. "We voted to organize a military coalition against the Void Reapers," Vera said, settling onto a nearby bench. "David will coordinate with other houses' naval forces." "That sounds like a wise decision." Ben made a small adjustment to the orchid's support structure. "Your brother has good tactical instincts." "Ben, I wish you would consider attending these meetings sometimes. Your perspective might be valuable." For the first time that evening, Ben looked directly at her. His brown eyes held warmth but also something else, a distance that Vera could never quite understand. "I appreciate the invitation, but military strategy is not my area of knowledge. I would contribute nothing useful to such discussions." "You have traveled extensively before coming here. You must have observed different cultures and their approaches to conflict resolution." Ben returned his attention to the orchid. "I have seen many different worlds and peoples, yes. But observation and participation are different things. I prefer to focus on helping life grow rather than planning how to destroy it." Vera felt frustration rising in her chest. "These pirates are destroying lives right now. They have killed hundreds of innocent workers and threatened thousands more. Sometimes we must fight to protect what we value." "You are absolutely right," Ben said quietly. "And your family has the wisdom and strength to handle such challenges." "I have complete confidence in their abilities." "But what about your abilities? What about your commitment to this family?" Ben set down his gardening tools and moved to sit beside Vera on the bench. He took her hands gently in his own, which were calloused from years of careful work with soil and roots. "My commitment to you and to this family is absolute," he said softly. "But my way of contributing may look different from what others expect. I believe that maintaining life and beauty has its own value, especially during times of conflict and uncertainty." "My father thinks you are avoiding responsibility." Perhaps he is right, from his perspective. Admiral Corinth has spent his life leading fleets and making difficult tactical decisions. That is his strength and his calling. Mine lies elsewhere. Vera studied Ben's face in the soft greenhouse lighting. After 3 months of marriage, she still felt like she was looking at a mystery. He spoke about his past in vague terms, mentioning travels and experiences without providing specific details. His knowledge of plants seemed to extend far beyond what any normal botanical researcher should possess. Sometimes she caught him looking at the stars with an expression that suggested he was seeing something far beyond the visible light. "Ben, what did you do before you came to work for my family?" "I traveled. I learned. I sought understanding." "That is not a real answer." Ben smiled sadly. "It is the only answer I can give right now." 2 weeks later, Uncle Rico's worst fears became reality. The Void Reapers launched a massive coordinated strike against mining operations throughout the sector. Within a single day, they destroyed 12 stations and captured 4 more intact. The death toll exceeded 800 people, and the economic damage reached into the billions of credits. The emergency family meeting that followed was unlike any Vera had witnessed before. Admiral Corinth's carefully controlled demeanor cracked as reports continued arriving. David paced the room like a caged predator, demanding immediate retaliation. Maya worked frantically to coordinate with other affected houses, trying to salvage their coalition plans. Uncle Rico sat in stunned silence, staring at projections showing the complete loss of operations he had spent decades building. "They knew," David said for the 5th time. Somehow they knew exactly which stations had the most valuable stockpiles and which ones were most lightly defended. "Intelligence leak," Admiral Corinth agreed grimly. "Someone with access to our operational data betrayed us to the pirates. Or they have better reconnaissance capabilities than we estimated," Maya added. Some sources suggest they have been infiltrating mining operations for months, gathering information. It does not matter how they knew, Uncle Rico said finally. What matters is that they have essentially destroyed our outer rim presence in a single day. The holographic displays showed the scope of the disaster in harsh detail. Red zones marked areas now under pirate control. Yellow zones indicated regions too dangerous for normal operations. Green zones, representing secure territory, had shrunk to a fraction of their previous size. The other houses are demanding immediate action, Maya reported. House Drakmore has already committed their entire private fleet to hunting down the Void Reapers. House Vesperian is calling for Confederation Navy intervention. Which we know will not come, Admiral Corinth said bitterly. The Navy remains focused on the core system conflicts. As the discussion turned to desperate measures, hiring expensive mercenaries, forming alliance with questionable organizations, even considering negotiating with the pirates themselves, Vera found herself thinking about Ben. He would be in the gardens now, probably working with the evening blooming specimens that required attention after sunset. Part of her wanted to find him and demand that he acknowledge the crisis facing their family. Another part worried about what she might discover if she pushed too hard for answers about his mysterious past. The meeting continued past midnight without reaching any satisfactory conclusions. The Void Reapers had moved too fast and struck too hard for conventional responses to be effective. House Stellaris faced the possibility of complete financial collapse if they could not find a way to restore their mining operations or replace the lost income. As Vera finally made her way back to her quarters, she passed through the crystal gardens where she had walked that morning. The area looked the same, but everything felt different now. The beautiful plants and artistic arrangements seemed like luxuries they could no longer afford. The peaceful atmosphere felt disconnected from the harsh realities of galactic conflict. She found Ben exactly where she expected, in the greenhouse, working quietly among his specimens. But tonight something was different. He was not tending plants or organizing seed collections. Instead, he knelt before a small alcove she had never noticed before, where several objects were arranged on what looked like a simple shrine. Among the items, she could see an old book written in a script she did not recognize, a small piece of polished stone, and what appeared to be a simple blade wrapped in dark cloth. Ben? He turned toward her, and for just a moment, his expression was unlike anything she had ever seen from him. There was a depth in his eyes that spoke of experiences far beyond tending gardens and studying plant growth. Vera. I heard about the attacks. I am sorry for your family's losses. 537 people died today, she said quietly. People who worked for us. People we were responsible for protecting. Ben stood slowly and moved toward her. I know. And I know this brings great pain to everyone who loved them. Ben, I need you to tell me the truth about who you really are. For a long moment, they stood facing each other in the soft greenhouse lighting. Around them, the night-blooming flowers released their gentle fragrances into the air. The contrast between this peaceful sanctuary and the violence consuming their world felt almost overwhelming. I am exactly who I appear to be, Ben said finally. A man who loves you completely and who finds meaning in helping life grow and flourish. But that is not the whole truth. No, Ben agreed quietly. It is not the whole truth. Then tell me the rest. Ben looked toward the small shrine, then back at Vera. Some truths are better revealed through actions than words. And some truths should only be revealed when there is no other choice. What does that mean? It means that I hope we never reach the point where you need to know everything about my past. The next morning brought news that changed everything. The Void Reapers had sent a message to all the affected noble houses, delivered through encrypted channels that suggested sophisticated communication capabilities. Admiral Corinth read the message aloud to the Emergency Family Council, Houses of the Outer Rim. Your mining operations now belong to us. Your workers serve us. Your profits feed our fleet. Submit to our authority and accept tributary status, or face complete destruction.
You have 7 days to decide. The room fell silent as the implications sank in.
This was not simply piracy or random raiding. The Void Reapers were attempting to establish territorial control over an entire sector of space. Tributary status, David repeated, his voice filled with disgust. They want us to become their vassals. Paying them a percentage of our profits in exchange for protection, Maya added, reading through additional details in the message. Like an ancient protection racket, but on an interstellar scale.
Uncle Rico looked physically ill. If we agree, we lose our independence and most of our income. If we refuse, they will destroy everything we have left. Admiral Corinth stood at the head of the table, looking older than Vera had ever seen him. Neither option is acceptable. House Stellaris has existed for 400 years without bowing to pirates and terrorists.
Then what do we do?
Vera asked. Before anyone could answer, the door to the war room opened unexpectedly.
Ben stepped inside, moving with the same quiet grace he always showed in the gardens. But something about his presence felt different. He carried himself with a subtle confidence that seemed to fill the entire room.
"Forgive the interruption," he said politely. "But I believe it is time for me to offer my contribution to this family's defense."
Admiral Corinth stared at the human who had married his daughter, the quiet gardener who had never shown interest in military affairs or political strategy.
"Ben," Vera said uncertainly, "you do not need to."
"Yes," Ben said simply, "I do." And for the first time since she had known him, Vera heard something in Ben's voice that made her believe there was much more to her gentle husband than anyone had ever imagined. The war room felt completely silent as Ben stepped forward. Admiral Corinth, David, Maya, and Uncle Rico all stared at the quiet human who had spent months tending gardens while their family faced increasingly dangerous threats. Vera felt her heart racing as she watched her husband move with a purposeful grace she had never seen before.
"What kind of contribution?" Admiral Corinth asked slowly, his voice carrying years of military suspicion.
Ben moved to one of the holographic displays showing the Void Reaper fleet positions. He studied the tactical information for several moments, his brown eyes taking in details that seemed to hold meaning beyond what anyone else could understand.
"They are not pirates," Ben said quietly. "Pirates take what they can carry and move on quickly to avoid military response. These raiders are establishing permanent control over territory.
They have a base of operations somewhere in this sector, probably hidden in an asteroid field or dead system."
David stepped closer to the display.
"We suspected they might have a permanent base, but our scouts have found nothing in 3 months of searching." "Your scouts are looking for obvious signs," Ben replied. "Energy signatures, communication traffic, large-scale construction."
"But there are other ways to hide a fleet base." Maya activated her data tablet and began taking notes.
"What other ways?" Ben pointed to a section of the star chart showing an area marked as unexplored space. Old Earth military history includes many examples of hidden strongholds. Sometimes the best place to hide is somewhere your enemies believe they have already searched. "You speak as if you have military experience," Admiral Corinth observed, his tone sharp with new interest. "I have studied many forms of conflict resolution," Ben answered carefully.
Uncle Rico leaned forward in his chair. "Studying and doing are different things. What exactly are you suggesting we do about our current situation?"
Ben turned away from the tactical display and faced the family council directly. For the first time since Vera had known him, his quiet demeanor seemed to carry an undercurrent of something far more intense.
"The Void Reapers believe they understand their enemies.
They have studied your military capabilities, your economic resources, and your political connections. They have planned their campaign based on what they think they know about the noble houses of this sector."
"And?" David asked impatiently.
"They have not accounted for variables they do not know exist."
Admiral Corinth crossed his arms.
"What variables?" Ben looked directly at Vera, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch in her throat. Love, yes, but also apology and a deep sadness that spoke of secrets he had hoped never to reveal.
Me, Ben said simply. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the habitat. Emergency lights bathed the war room in flashing red as automated systems announced an incoming threat.
Enemy ships detected, the computer voice reported. Multiple vessels approaching at combat speed.
Estimated arrival in 12 minutes.
Maya frantically activated the sensor displays, revealing a sight that made everyone's blood run cold. 15 ships had emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, their weapon signatures blazing like angry stars against the darkness of space.
How did they find us?
David demanded, already moving toward the communications console.
Our orbital habitat's location is supposed to be classified.
The same way they found our mining operations, Admiral Corinth replied grimly.
They have better intelligence than we realized. The largest enemy vessel began broadcasting on all frequencies.
A voice filled with cruel amusement echoed through the war room speakers.
House Stellaris.
I am Gorthak the Destroyer, commander of the Void Reaper fleet. Your 7 days have become 7 minutes. Surrender immediately or watch your pretty floating garden burn in the void.
Uncle Rico stared at the tactical display showing their orbital habitat's defensive capabilities compared to the approaching fleet.
Our shields can hold for maybe 20 minutes against that much firepower. Our weapons are designed to stop single raiders, not a full battle group. The emergency pods can evacuate essential personnel, Maya added quickly, but we would lose everything else. Admiral Corinth activated the habitat's defense systems, bringing weapon platforms online and raising energy shields to maximum strength.
We will not surrender to pirates. If this is where House Stellaris makes its final stand, then we will make it a memorable one.
As the family prepared for what seemed like inevitable destruction, Ben walked calmly to a wall section that Vera had always assumed held decorative artifacts from various worlds. She watched in confusion as he approached what appeared to be a simple display case containing several unremarkable objects.
Ben, what are you doing? She asked. We need to get to the emergency shelters.
No, Ben said quietly, his hand reaching toward an item she had never paid attention to before.
We need to end this.
His fingers closed around what looked like a plain sword hilt wrapped in dark leather. The moment Ben's skin made contact with the weapon, the air in the war room seemed to change. A low, deep sound began resonating through the metal walls of the habitat, like the echo of a bell that had been struck in some distant place.
Admiral Corinth spun around, his military instincts recognizing something significant even if he could not identify what. What is that sound?
Ben drew the blade from its simple scabbard, and Vera gasped as she saw her husband transformed. The sword in his hands was unlike anything she had ever seen. The metal seemed to drink in light and reflected back as something purer and more intense.
Along the blade's length, symbols glowed with a soft silver radiance that pulsed in rhythm with Ben's heartbeat.
Impossible, Maya whispered, her data tablet forgotten in her hands.
That is a Terran ceremonial blade. They are supposed to be museum pieces. Not ceremonial, Ben corrected gently. Active duty.
David stared at the weapon, his military training helping him recognize details others missed.
The balance is perfect. The edge geometry is designed for actual combat, not display.
Where did you get that? It was given to me, Ben replied, when I earned the right to carry it. The mysterious humming sound grew stronger as Ben moved toward the center of the war room. He spoke words in an ancient Earth language that none of them recognized, but the syllables seemed to resonate with power that made the habitat's metal structure vibrate sympathetically.
Ben, Vera said, her voice barely above a whisper, who are you really?
Ben looked at her with infinite gentleness and terrible sadness.
I am exactly what I told you.
A gardener who loves growing things and helping life flourish.
But I am also something else. He raised the glowing blade and spoke in clear, carrying tones that seemed to reach far beyond the confines of the war room.
I am Ben of the Earth Guard, keeper of the old ways, protector of the green and growing worlds.
And this is my blade song.
The sword in his hands blazed with light as Ben's voice rose in what sounded like music but felt like controlled lightning. The weapon sang in harmonics that penetrated bone and spirit, announcing to anyone within range that something ancient and dangerous had awakened. On the main display, the approaching Void Reaper fleet suddenly slowed their advance. Communication traffic spiked as the enemy commanders tried to understand the energy signatures now emanating from the orbital habitat.
What is happening? Gorthak's voice demanded over the speakers. What are those energy readings?
Ben continued his song, and the sword's light grew brighter with each note. Around him, the air began to shimmer as if reality itself was bending to accommodate forces that normal physics could not explain.
Impossible, Admiral Corinth breathed. Human technology does not include energy weapons of this type.
This is not technology, Ben said, his voice carrying clearly despite the ongoing sword song.
This is tradition. This is memory. This is the promise Earth made when we first learned we were not alone in the universe. The main viewer showed something extraordinary happening in the space around their habitat. Streams of silver light were flowing outward from their position, reaching across thousands of kilometers to touch each enemy ship in turn.
As the light made contact, the Void Reaper vessels began to slow and drift, their weapon systems powering down involuntarily.
Shields failing, came panicked reports from the enemy fleet. Navigation systems offline. Weapons not responding to commands.
Gorthak's voice carried a note of fear for the first time.
What are you doing to my ships? Ben lowered his sword but did not sheath it.
The glowing symbols along the blade continued to pulse with steady rhythm as he activated the habitat's communication system. Gorthak of the Void Reapers, he said, his quiet voice somehow carrying absolute authority. You have attacked innocent people and threatened families under my protection. By the ancient laws of Earth and the compact we made with the stars themselves, I offer you one chance to withdraw and never return.
Who are you to make demands? Gorthak roared back. I command 15 battlecruisers.
I have conquered star systems.
I am human, Ben replied simply. And that means something different than you believed. What happened next would be remembered and retold throughout the galaxy for generations.
Ben began to move through a series of forms with his glowing sword, each motion precise and flowing like water. But these were not mere combat exercises. As he moved, the streams of silver light reaching toward the enemy fleet began to pulse and dance in complex patterns. One by one, the Void Reaper ships found their systems coming back online, but under external control. Their own weapons turned to target each other. Their navigation systems began plotting courses away from the orbital habitat and back toward the edge of the system.
This is impossible. Gorthak's voice cracked with disbelief. Human technology cannot do this.
You are correct, Ben agreed calmly, still moving through his sword forms.
Human technology cannot do this.
But human will, properly focused and channeled through ancient disciplines, can accomplish what your understanding of physics says should be impossible. Vera watched in amazement as her quiet husband demonstrated abilities that redefined everything she thought she knew about her own species.
The other noble houses had always viewed humans as physically weak and technologically primitive.
They had joined the galactic community as junior partners, grateful to be included among the established spacefaring races. But Ben was showing them something that challenged every assumption about human limitations. The Earthguard, he continued, his voice carrying to every ship in the enemy fleet, were created in humanity's darkest hour, when we first realized that survival among the stars would require more than weapons and shields. We learned to harmonize our consciousness with the fundamental forces that bind matter and energy together. The enemy fleet was now in full retreat, their ships fleeing toward the edge of the system under the control of Ben's mysterious influence. But their commander was not finished.
This is not over, human. Gorthak transmitted as his flagship prepared to jump to faster than light speed. The Void Reapers have allies across the galaxy. We will return with forces you cannot imagine.
Ben lowered his sword and looked directly at the main viewer, as if he could see through space to stare into the enemy commander's eyes. "Tell your allies," he said quietly, "that Earth remembers how to protect what it loves. Tell them that humans are not the weak, primitive species they believed. And tell them that there are more of us watching from the shadows than they can possibly imagine." The enemy fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving the orbital habitat floating peacefully in space as if nothing had happened. The silver streams of light faded away, and the sword in Ben's hands returned to looking like a simple, if well-crafted, blade. For several long moments, the war room remained completely silent. Admiral Corinth, David, Maya, Uncle Rico, and Vera all stared at Ben as he carefully sheathed his weapon and returned it to its place among the wall displays. "Well," he said finally, brushing a speck of dust from his gardening clothes, "I should check on the night-blooming orchids. They become stressed when there is too much electromagnetic activity in the area." "Ben," Admiral Corinth said slowly, "what just happened here?" "A misunderstanding was corrected," Ben replied. "Pirates who believed they understood their enemies discovered they were wrong." David stepped forward, his military training struggling to process what he had witnessed. "That sword, those abilities, are there others like you?" Ben smiled with the same gentle expression Vera had seen him wear while tending flowers. "Humans have always been gardeners at heart. We plant seeds, tend growing things, and protect what we value. Sometimes that protection requires tools and knowledge that others do not expect us to possess." "How many?" Maya asked, her diplomatic mind already working through the implications. "How many humans have these abilities?" "Enough," Ben answered simply. Uncle Rico leaned back in his chair, still staring at the tactical display showing empty space where a pirate fleet had been moments before. The entire galactic balance of power just shifted, and none of us saw it coming. "The balance has not shifted," Ben corrected gently. "It has simply been revealed. Humans have never sought to dominate or conquer. We prefer to grow quietly in our gardens and hope that others will leave us in peace." "And if they do not?" Admiral Corinth asked. Ben's expression remained peaceful, but something in his eyes reminded everyone of the silver light that had just reached across space to disable 15 warships. "Then they learn why gardeners carry tools," he said quietly. As Ben prepared to leave the war room and return to his plants, Vera stepped forward and took his hand. The same calloused fingers that had just guided forces beyond normal understanding were warm and gentle as always. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked. "Because I hoped you would never need to know," Ben replied honestly. "I came here to tend gardens and find peace. I found something better, I found you. I had hoped that would be enough. And now?" Ben looked around the war room, taking in the faces of her family members who were all staring at him with new understanding and respect. "Now everyone knows that humans are not what they seemed," he said. "Word of what happened here will spread throughout the galaxy within days. Our quiet time is ending." "Is that bad?" Vera asked. Ben considered the question carefully before answering. "Change is neither good nor bad in itself. Seeds must break open to grow into plants. Caterpillars must transform to become butterflies. Perhaps it is time for humanity to step forward from the shadows and show our true nature to the galaxy." Admiral Corinth approached them, his expression showing newfound respect for the man who had married his daughter. "Ben," he said formally, "House Stellaris owes you a debt that cannot be repaid. You saved our lives and our legacy." "No debt exists," Ben replied with a small bow. "We are family. Family protects family." As the immediate crisis passed and normal operations resumed throughout the orbital habitat, word of the encounter began spreading through communication networks across the sector. Other noble houses reported that Void Reaper attacks had stopped completely, with pirate fleets withdrawing from all contested territories. More significantly, reports began arriving of similar incidents throughout human space. Pirates, raiders, and hostile alien forces that had been attacking human colonies and trading posts found themselves facing unexpected resistance from defenders who demonstrated abilities that challenged every assumption about human limitations. The quiet species that had joined the galactic community as humble newcomers was revealing itself to be something far more mysterious and potentially powerful than anyone had imagined. 3 days later, as Vera walked through the crystal gardens where she had first met Ben, she reflected on how much their lives had changed. Her husband knelt in his usual spot among the rainbow moss, working with the same gentle care he had always shown. But now she understood that his quiet strength extended far beyond botanical knowledge. The Galactic News Service is reporting that human colonies across 3 sectors have successfully defended against attacks this week, she said, settling beside him on the soft grass. People are learning to protect what they value, Ben replied without looking up from his work. It is a natural response. The Confederation Council has requested a formal meeting with Earth government representatives. They want to discuss humanity's role in galactic security. Change brings new responsibilities, Ben agreed. And new opportunities for growth. Vera watched her husband's careful hands as he adjusted the growing conditions for a delicate flowering plant. The same hands had recently held a weapon that channeled forces beyond normal understanding, but they moved with identical gentleness whether tending gardens or defending star systems. "Do you regret that our quiet time is ending?" she asked. Ben finally looked up at her, his brown eyes holding the same love and warmth that had first captured her attention months ago. "Every gardener knows that growing seasons change," he said softly. "Spring gives way to summer, which yields to autumn and winter. Each season has its own beauty and purpose." He reached out to take her hand, intertwining their fingers as naturally as roots finding water. "Our quiet spring together was beautiful, and I will treasure those memories always. But perhaps it is time for humanity to step into a different season." As they sat together in the crystal gardens, surrounded by growing things from across the galaxy, the future stretched before them with infinite possibilities. The gentle human who had drawn his sword and shaken the world was still the same man who found joy in helping flowers bloom. The difference was that now the galaxy knew that humanity's true strength lay not in weakness or submission, but in the quiet determination to protect and nurture life wherever it took root among the stars. And in gardens across human space, other keepers of the old ways tended their plants and waited to see what seeds this new season would help to grow.